That'll ever be. All right, welcome back to Nothing to Be Afraid of, a study of the book of Revelation. Tonight is actually part 9, and if all goes well, and if your patience lasts long enough, I'm going to try to get 2 chapters in tonight. We'll see. We'll see how it goes. I promise I won't keep you too late. So, we're talking about the 7th seal and the 7 trumpets tonight. So, let's read both chapters, chapter 8 and chapter 9 of Revelation. It says, "When the Lamb opened the 7th seal, there was silence in heaven for about half an hour. And I saw the 7 angels who stand before God, and 7 trumpets were given to them. Another angel with a golden censer came and stood at the altar. He was given a great quantity of incense to offer with the prayers of all the saints on the golden altar that is before the throne. And the smoke of the incense, with the prayers of the saints, rose before God from the hand of the angel. Then the angel took the censer and filled it with fire from the altar and threw it on the earth. And there were peals of thunder, rumblings, flashes of lightning, and an earthquake. Now the 7 angels who had the 7 trumpets were made ready to blow them. The first angel blew his trumpet, and there came hail and fire mixed with blood. And they were hurled to the earth, and a third of the earth was burned up, and a third of the trees were burned up, and all green grass was burned up. The second angel blew his trumpet, and something like a great mountain burning with fire was thrown into the sea. A third of the sea became blood. A third of the living creatures in the sea died, and a third of the ships were destroyed. The third angel blew his trumpet, and a great star fell from heaven, blazing like a torch, and it fell on a third of the rivers and on the springs of water. The name of the star is Wormwood. A third of the waters became wormwood, and many died from the water because it was made bitter. The fourth angel blew his trumpet, and a third of the sun was struck, and a third of the moon, and a third of the stars, so that a third of their light was darkened. A third of the day was kept from shining, and likewise the night. Then I looked, and I heard an angel crying with a loud voice as it flew in mid-heaven, "Woe, woe, woe to the inhabitants of the earth, at the blasts of the other trumpets that the 3 angels are about to blow." And the 5th angel blew his trumpet, and I saw a star that had fallen from heaven to earth, and he was given the key of the shaft of the bottomless pit. He opened the shaft of the bottomless pit, and from the shaft rose smoke, like the smoke of a great furnace. And the sun and the air were darkened with the smoke from the shaft. Then from the smoke came locusts on the earth, and they were given authority like the authority of scorpions of the earth. They were told not to damage the grass of the earth or any green growth of any tree, but only those people who do not have the seal of God on their foreheads. They were allowed to torture them for 5 months, but not to kill them. And their torture was like the torture of a scorpion when it stings someone. And in those days, people will seek death, but they will not find it. They will long to die, but death will flee from them. In appearance, the locusts were like horses equipped for battle. On their heads were what looked like crowns of gold. Their faces were like human faces, their hair like women's hair, and their teeth like lions' teeth. They had scales like iron breastplates, and the noise of their wings was like the noise of many chariots with horses rushing into battle. They have tails like scorpions with stingers, and in their tail is the power to harm people for 5 months. They have as their king over them the angel of the bottomless pit. His name in Hebrew is Abaddon, and in Greek he is called Apollyon. The first woe has passed. There are still 2 woes to come. Then the 6th angel blew his trumpet, and I heard a voice from the 4 horns of the golden altar before God, saying to the 6th angel who had the trumpet, "Release the 4 angels who are bound at the great river Euphrates." So the 4 angels were released, who had been held ready for the hour, the day, the month, and the year, to kill a third of humankind. The number of the troops of cavalry was 200 million. I heard their number. And this was how I saw the horses in my vision. The riders wore breastplates, the color of fire, and of sapphire, and of sulfur. The heads of the horses were like lions' heads, and fire and smoke and sulfur came out of their mouths. But by these 3 plagues, a third of humankind was killed, by the fire and smoke and sulfur coming out of their nostrils. For the power of the horses is in their mouths and in their tails. Their tails are like serpents, having heads, and with them they inflict harm. The rest of humankind, who were not killed by these plagues, did not repent of the works of their hands, or give up worshiping demons and idols of gold and silver and bronze and stone and wood, which cannot see or hear or walk. And they did not repent of their murders, or their sorceries, or their fornications, or their thefts. Well, it all gets cheerful after that. Little scary. So imagine, again, you're sitting here and you're hearing this all in one reading. And you're hearing that this is the first woe. There's 2 more to come, and you're like, can it get any worse? Actually, yes. The very first sentence, the very first verse, first sentence of chapter 8 is something that has always been fascinating and really rather astonishing to me. When the Lamb opens the seal, it says there is silence in heaven. Now, we've heard trumpets, we've heard peals of thunder, we've heard lightning flashes, seen lightning flashes, we've heard all this, we've heard angels shouting to each other, we've heard all this, and now, for 30 minutes, for half an hour, silence. I have heard the worst doctrines created around trying to fill that 30 minutes. People have said, well, this is when that thing takes place, or this is when this other thing takes place, or here's what's happening there. And there's nothing that tells us what's going on, but we are told what's about to happen. And we miss it. In the middle of all this, in the middle of here's angels blowing trumpets, here's demons playing banjos. That's what I figured demons play. Here's all these other things going on, and now, quiet. Some have suggested that this silence is kind of reflective of the primeval silence that was before the moment of creation. Everything's quiet. Then the Lord speaks. Okay. That's okay. You can believe that way. The silence before some climactic scene. In Zephaniah chapter 1 verse 7 and in Zechariah 2:13, there's always a silence that comes before a divine epiphany, the Lord showing the divine self. Okay, that's not bad also. I'm convinced that it's something more than that. Maybe more than that, maybe less than that, depending on how you look at it. What's happening is that there is an angel there with a golden incense burner, a censer, and this is the prayers of the saints. God is calling for silence to hear the prayers of the people on earth. That's as profound as you're going to get. I mean, why carve out some kind of special doctrine about this is where the rapture is going to place, or that this is where the first thing happens, or this is where this is where God goes, quiet down, hold it down, blows the gym teacher whistle, everybody silent, because I'm about to hear the prayers of the saints. That's just remarkable to me. That's always been such a fascinating scene to me, is that no matter what's going on, God takes time to listen to us, to focus in on us. And silence is really, in the Jewish tradition and in the early Christian tradition, is a prelude to prayer. That before prayers were ever altered, there was a good period of silence. Self-reflection took place there, contemplating on what our prayers should be about. So all of this figures into John's vision that he's seeing here. With the opening of the seventh seal, we're expecting the final cataclysm. We've had 6 seals already that were pretty horrific, and now here comes the 7, but it's not what we expect at all. It's kind of an interlude. Nothing happens. A solemn hush. But we're expecting the onslaught of a hurricane or something else to follow after this immediately. And it creates the effect of kind of heightening the power, heightening the horror that's going to come and what we're expecting in these next series of judgments with these trumpets about to be blown. Each one of these things is announced by the blowing of a trumpet. No, the silence is more than just pause for effect. The prayers of the saints are about to reach God, causing everything else to cease, all sound to hush, all of God's attention focused on the prayers that are coming before him. So we're about to see the heavenly worship through the sounding of the 7 trumpets. We're in the heavenly sanctuary, and the 7 angels who are before the throne are given these 7 trumpets. Just like the pattern that we already saw with the seals, the trumpets follow a similar pattern with a kind of a 4+3 model with an extensive interlude in between the 6th and 7th trumpets, just like there was the interlude between the 6th and 7th seal. Beginning with verse 7 then, the first 4 trumpets continue to intensify the visions of the final troubles of the world before God's ultimate victory and just reign. The 7 trumpets are actually modeled on the plagues of Exodus. Just like now of course in Exodus there's 10 plagues, but in other places like in Amos and in other places like that, you'll see different numbers of plagues or different numbers of calamities that will fall along. Amos talks a good deal about this is what's going to happen when the Assyrians get here. This is what's going to happen. And in the same way, John uses his number 7, he likes, because remember, 7, divine completion. That's John's great number for talking about the plans of God and the fulfillment of God's plans. So just like the liberating act of God in Exodus, so are these trumpets part of the liberating act of God. Remember, we don't focus on what horrifying things are happening, because when we do that, we think, yeah, see, these people have it coming. They deserve it. Nowhere are we supposed to think like that. Nowhere, as I've said before, are we supposed to look at the Egyptians and go, they have it coming. God was out to get them. No. That's not the point of the story. The point of the story is the deliverance of God's people from what they're going through. That's the whole point. So at no point do we stand there and rub our hands in anticipation of the unrighteous getting it. Because that's actually what the ancient Hebrews had believed for so long, is that the day of the Lord is the day when they get theirs and God's going to give it to them. When Amos is the first one who says, you don't want that. You don't want the day of the Lord. It's not them who's going to get it. It's you. Because you're the one who has the relationship. You're the one who has the covenant. Well, remember, the number 7, it shows divine completion. We also have to take note that these 7 angels are identified as the 7 angels who stand before God. Now, don't interpret that as being these 7 angels who happen to be there at the moment. These are the 7 angels who are always before the throne of God. These guys are a special group, and Jewish literature made a great deal of who these 7 were and what their function was. In fact, that tradition kind of goes hand in hand with one of the books of the Apocrypha, the book of Tobit. You ever read that yet? Okay. In the book of Tobit, it's a great, 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 great story. It's considered, the Roman Catholic Church calls it deuterocanonical, which means it forms a second canon. Other people call them intertestamental books. Protestantism just basically calls them the Apocrypha. That yes, they were writings. Yes, they were inspirational writings. We got a lot out of them. But the difference between Protestant and Catholic is that Catholic says, yes, we can use those books to support doctrine. In fact, the doctrine of purgatory is said to have had no, not really though, but they said that here's where we're going to go and look for this. Here's a doctrine, and it's in like 2nd Maccabees or something like that. And of course, Protestant boy that I am, looked at it and go, I don't see it. I don't get it there. So I was asking the Jesuits that I was living with, okay, show me here where it's purgatory. Well, it's right there. No, it's not. Tell me, how is that purgatory? Well, they just finally said, well, until you awaken and become one of us, I'll stay asleep, thank you. But so in dealing with the Apocrypha, Martin Luther said it is profitable for instruction, but not doctrine. Meaning, read it, enjoy it, you can get a lot out of it, but don't build doctrine around it. So the book of Tobit, it's a great story. This guy, his name is obviously Tobit. His son Tobias is wanting to have to get a wife, right? And so he says, you go to the land of your kinsmen, and there you'll find someone. And we talk about kinsmen, we're not talking about like first cousin. We're talking about a clan where it could be 27th cousin, 22nd times removed, or something like that. Anyway, so off he goes. Well, a guy comes along and says, hey, I'm going to go with you on this trip. You and I are related. You don't know me, but we're related. And he goes, well, okay. And the father goes, great. Well, this guy, we find out, is Raphael, one of those 7 angels. So off he goes. Now, here's a thing that I've always liked. In fact, I wrote an article on it one time. Because the guy says, Tobit, the father, says, he makes his prayer, Lord, I wish that you would send an angel with these two, in addition to Raphael, send an angel with these 2 to guard them on their trip there and back. Now, no angel that we know, no human-esque form shows up, a dog shows up, and the dog follows them all the way to the place. Is this an angelic dog? Well, now Audrey would say, yes, there are such things. But I've certainly met some demonic dogs. So off they go. When they get there, I just have to tell you the whole story. When they get there, Tobias goes in, meets the kinsman, and he goes, yes, I have my daughter, but you should know, there is a demon who is kind of infatuated with her, and his name is Asmodeus, and he has killed, I think, 5 grooms. They get married, they go into the wedding tent, he dies. And so Raphael says to Tobias, I got this, don't worry. You just go ahead, you marry the girl, I'll take care of everything. Here's what I want you to do. He says, I want you to make a sacrifice inside the tent, and I want you to pray. Everything will be fine. Okay. So now, Tobias goes into the wedding tent with his bride, and the father goes out and starts digging a grave. He's already expecting that, I know it's going to happen. It's happened 5 times before. Digging this grave, and along comes Asmodeus. And it says that Raphael seized him, bound him hand and foot, and drug him to the pit. that's just a good story. And so now nobody knows that. It's just, but the wedding prayer, the wedding night prayer that Tobias offers is gorgeous. It should be in wedding ceremonies. So he makes this prayer, and the night passes in peace. Everything's fine. And first thing in the morning, the father goes in there and throws back the timber. It's like the Young Frankenstein movie. He's alive! Anyway, so off he goes now. Tobias and Raphael and the bride and the dog go back to Tobit's house, and everybody lives happily ever after. Now, in that story, I tell you all that because I like it, number one. Number two, because in the book of Tobit, they actually list the 7 angels who stand before the Lord. The 6 angels who are, no, sorry, Raphael is named as one of the angels who stands before the Lord. It's the book of Enoch, chapter 20, which is not even really in the Apocrypha. It's in still another once removed collection of books called the Pseudepigrapha. And in the book of Enoch, they list, there is Raphael, there is Uriel, the watcher, he's called, Raguel, Sariel, Gabriel, for him, Remiel, and Michael. All of these names are extraordinary names. Gabriel, for example, means the mighty man of God, or sometimes is translated as a hero of God, meaning hero from God, not God looks up to him. Michael is one of the fascinating names. It's a question. It means, who is like God? Nobody. Now, there are some groups who say that Michael is the Old Testament version of Jesus because it's with an exclamation point. This one, who is like God? Jesus, who is like God? So these are the angels that John says are given the 7 trumpets. They will play their part in heralding the following judgments. No doubt about it, the trumpet is the favorite instrument of the apocalypticists. Daniel's got them, Zechariah's got them, Isaiah's got them, and certainly here John has them. For this commercial break.
When you're, I was writing down to put the books in the links for the YouTube, and I was writing down 7 angels, and with that story, I was like thinking of 7 brides for 7 brothers, 7 angels for 7 demons.
7.
I wasn't sure there was a place for 7 demons. Anyway.
Yes, that's right.
And I was thinking a great name for a dog would be Tobit.
Really? That's right.
If we ever have another dog.
Yeah.
There you go.
Do you?
We did.
Oh, really?
It's Alaskan Malamute.
Wow.
See?
That's cool.
Beautiful dog. Like to kill.
I know. I thought that was going to happen in the story. I was waiting
I
for
thought
the dog
was going to attack.
No,
Yeah.
it's just that apparently the dog was a guardian along the way. Nothing happened to him on the way there, on the way back. It answered Tobit's prayer, and this was some angelic dog, I suppose. Okay, back to the corresponding nature of Revelation and the 7 or the plagues of Egypt. So the treatment of the Christians in Rome can pretty easily be compared to the enslavement of the Israelites in the land of Egypt. God's judgments on the enemies of the church, John says, will be much like the plagues on the pharaohs of ancient Egypt. So now, the last of the 4 horsemen, we are told, had authority to harm 1/4 of the earth. And everything was done in fourths at that point. Now, with the sounding of the first trumpet, things are escalated a bit. The destruction becomes even more widespread. And instead of there being 1/4 of all these things, it's now a third. The third is following the second, third, and fourth trumpets. This continuation of afflictions of the earth is now all in terms of this 1/3. A third of the sea, a third of the sea creatures, a third of the ships, a third of the rivers, a third of the moon, the sun, the stars, a third of the fountains of water. And at each of the 4 trumpets, a third or 3 things happen. So you have the 4 times 3 again, and 12, the number shows up. Pardon me. Now, there can be little doubt from a historical viewpoint that John has a specific image in mind when he's talking about this. He's talking about the storms. He's talking about earthquakes. He's talking about eclipses. All of this is still kind of fresh in a first century person's mind. John would have been very aware of a cataclysmic event that took place in the year 79, not so far from Rome, the eruption of Mount Vesuvius. When Vesuvius explodes, of course we all know, Pompeii and Herculaneum are completely buried. And likewise, the Gulf of Naples was almost destroyed. Certainly the ships that were in there, hot ash from that, the pyroclastic cloud just burns everything around. Then comes the lava. You've got the earthquakes that's followed. You've got the blast. All of this and this is happening so close to Rome that it's really worldwide news as far as the Roman Empire is concerned. So when John talks about something like a great mountain that was burning with fire, thrown into the sea, he's describing Vesuvius. And John's readers are all immediately aware that this is what we're talking about. The judgments that then follow each of the first 4 trumpets are the elemental forces of nature. We have things that occur just in nature. That's the first 4. And then comes the woes, the things that follow. The last 3 trumpets are all heralding demonic forces in John's worldview. An eagle announces, like we read in chapter 8, verse 13, it says, "Woe, woe, woe to the inhabitants of the earth, at the blasts of the other trumpets that the 3 angels are about to blow." It's so hard not to go into a Three Stooges routine when you've got whoa, whoa, whoa. But whoa, whoa, is it a threefold lament? Yes. Is it also numbering these are how many woes are about to come? Yes. It's all of those things. So we've clearly got an announcement here that what's about to happen is about to get worse. So we have the 5th trumpet. Just like the sequence of the seals, the 5th and 6th trumpets are described in much greater detail than the preceding 4 trumpets, or 4 seals in that case. When the 5th angel blows his trumpet, it says that this star that has fallen is used to open this bottomless pit, and these locusts start coming out of the pit from the abyss. These locusts come out, and they're pretty horrifying. They have a leader whose name is Abaddon in Hebrew, means the destroyer. But that's a name that was used very often in the Hebrew Bible, in the Old Testament. When it talks about the destroyer, it's talking about locusts, the things that just wiped out whole crops. So now, what had once been used to wipe out crops is being used against humanity, being against the human race. And he says that's the Hebrew name. The Greek name is Apollyon. He gives us the Greek version just to make sure everybody gets what he's talking about. This is a rough customer who's coming up here, out from the bottomless pit. And just like in chapter 4, verse 1, we saw the door to the heavens that was opened up, and he saw the vision. It says, I was in the spirit, and he saw everything beyond there. Now it's reversed. Now you start seeing what's coming up out of the underworld. Remember, in John's cosmology, in John's worldview, it's 3 levels. There's heaven, there's earth, and there's the underworld. Just like everybody else in the world was believing at the time. The Norse had Asgard, Midgard, and Niflheim. Everybody has it. So now, whereas before we had seen humanity basically protected from these underworldly forces, now even they are being released against humanity. Removing the protections that had kept these demonic forces at bay, now they're going to invade the human realm. As king of these demonic locusts, Abaddon's ministry, maybe, mission is simply to destroy. But they're not like any other swarm of locusts that you've seen before. They are like, he says, a cavalry with horses that are armed for battle. They have human faces. They have crowns of gold. Their hair is long, he says, like a woman's. Their teeth are like lion's teeth, and they have tails with scorpion stingers on them. Frightening stuff. And he says that these critters aren't supposed to harm the vegetation on the earth, not like real locusts, that's what they do. No, he says they're not supposed to hurt the vegetation. In fact, they are expressly forbidden from doing such things. They're told to inflict torment on the oppressors of God's people. And it says they're supposed to do that for the space of about 5 months. Why 5 months? Because that's how long locusts live. Simple as that. These are supposed to be basically locusts on steroids, I guess. These are locusts who are not just going to get the wheat and the barley and the corn. They're out to get you. Make great, terrifying nursery rhymes, like my mom used to tell me. And then you wind up praying, if I should die before I wake. That was a terrible prayer to inflict on a child. Anyway, so here are these critters now living the lifespan of a normal locust. And just like the Israelites had been protected from the plagues of ancient Egypt, so are the people of God who've got the seal on their forehead. Remember what that is? Seal? Say it.
Baptism?
Yeah, right. Baptism. That's all the seal is just marked with the baptism. The suffering that's caused by these locusts is so agonizing that people prefer death, but death ain't happening. Death will escape them. As Bruce Metzger said in his book, physical death is no remedy for the torment of an evil conscience. Do you want to get away from it? Nope, there's no getting away from it. So, we want Chuck.
I get that 144,000 comes up in this Bible. It says they're the ones that are not hurt by this plague.
Mm-hmm. So, it's still us. I mean, us being still God's people. Not remember, the 144,000 is the 12 times 12 times thousands. It simply means those who have the seal. Mm-hmm. Those who have been baptized, he would say. Yeah. So he says, then we wind up with the 6th trumpet. And he summons 2 100 million horsemen to cross the Euphrates River and to kill a third of humanity. Once again, if you remember when we were talking about the 4 horsemen, and the first horseman was the one with the bow, and he represented the Parthians. The Parthians are just across the Euphrates River from the Roman Empire. They are the eastern terror for the Romans. The Romans are more afraid of them than they've been afraid of anybody. Because when the Romans have crossed the Euphrates, every time they've been hurled back in great defeat. In fact, a guy who's going to come along much later, a guy named Julian the Apostate, is going to try to take them on again. And this emperor will wind up dying in combat. From the times of Julius Caesar, what's his name? Crassus. Marcus Licinius Crassus. He was a guy who had been given charge of the eastern provinces, and he decided he was going to expand the Roman Empire in that direction. That wasn't necessarily Rome at its height, but it was in its ascendancy, to be sure, and Crassus winds up dying against them. These guys are fierce, and so now, when he mentions the 200 across the Euphrates, everybody knows who he's talking about. Number one, remember, the Parthians were ones who used horse cavalry. Well, that's the only kind of cavalry there is. Who used cavalry. They had horse archers. They had lancers. They had horse with sabers, horsemen with sabers. And the Romans were kind of fixed with, like the phalanx. They were great foot soldiers. Sure, they had cavalry too. But these guys, almost like the Mongols who will come along many centuries later, these guys are horsemen. It means they're mobile, they're fast, they're nimble, and you're not going to catch them. They are great at hit and run kind of warfare. That's not what the Romans like. The Romans want to square up against you and beat you with discipline. That's not how these guys play ball. Pastor?
No, I just want to beat you with discipline.
Yeah.
You're not playing by our rules. It's not fair. Sorry. Yeah.
That's exactly right. Well, when you have well-trained people, like Alexander the Great's army was so well-trained, when you have, and you wind up facing these people who don't play by any rules, and they just throw numbers at you, like I was describing with somebody the other day, when the Russians were facing the Germans in World War II, the Russians didn't have the material. They didn't have enough rifles for everybody. They didn't have enough all this stuff. So what they had was a whole lot of people. And so they would rush, especially at Stalingrad, they would rush the German positions, and the guy in front would be running with the rifle. And the 2 guys behind him didn't have one, didn't need it, because the guy in front's going to get shot. And the second guy will then pick up his rifle. No worries, he's going to go down. So the third guy picks it up. That's just hideous warfare. I mean, sheer numbers. Now, that's kind of why he uses an exaggerated number like 200 million, because that's what it felt like to the Romans, is there were swarms of these Parthians who could not be caught. They moved like locusts moved, and they become a frightening source of dread for the Romans. And this dreaded cavalry is now going to be let loose upon the Roman provinces at the hour, the day, the month, and the appointed year. There is a time when they're coming. This is something that the Romans had anticipated and worried about. By the time John's writing this, we'll say the year 95, they have been worrying about this for the last 100 years. And they will continue to worry about the Parthians for the next 300 years, at least. So this is an ever-present image for them. Just like the dreaded Chaldeans were the scourge of the Assyrians in the book of Habakkuk, here too the Parthians are the ones that are most feared by the Roman Empire. In the book of Habakkuk, the reference is, Habakkuk was praying for the Lord to deliver them from the Assyrians. These Assyrians are terrible. You should get rid of them. You should do something. And the Lord goes, okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to send the Chaldeans, the Neo-Babylonians. I'm going to send the Chaldeans, and you haven't known trouble until you've seen them. Well, he's talking about Nebuchadnezzar. So, like the Christians were saying, could you please rescue us from these Romans? Just like the Hebrews had said, could you rescue us from these Assyrians? Yeah, but sometimes the cure is worse than the disease. So look out for, and that's what was feared. Now, they're not worried, however, about anything happening to them, because as far as the Roman Empire is concerned, the Christians are the enemies of the state. And so they would expect some leniency from the Parthians. Still, it's going to be an awful thing to watch. The Parthians are these frightening agents who will wind up destroying people by, what does it say, by fire, by smoke, by sulfur coming out of their nostrils. Now, we have to remember that all of this doesn't have to be literal. It doesn't have to be physically real. It's simply talking about the symbols of what God uses to enact God's judgment. The descriptions in the book of Revelation are not necessarily descriptions of real occurrences, but they're symbols of real occurrences. And even though the images are frightening, no doubt about it, the sounding of the 7 trumpets are not meant to inflict vengeance. They're meant to bring deliverance. Nowhere are we to look for revenge. Nowhere. This is simply God's mechanism for bringing deliverance to God's people. We're not talking about minimizing the weight of sin. We're not talking about minimizing rebellion against God. No. Instead, there is great emphasis on God's patience and mercy. When God could have, and John's point is, God could have done everything in one fell swoop. It's done in stages because there's always patience and mercy. And remember, don't ever forget that in the very first couple of chapters, when it's talking about the throne room, remember the thing that is seen around the throne of God? It's the rainbow, the sign of mercy, the sign of patience. So that's what we're focusing on. That's what John is telling us to focus on. Focus on the patience, focus on the mercy. Where there could have been total destruction, and people could argue that it was deserved, it's not. It's only a fraction that is suffered. Sadly, however, all of this doesn't do anything to change the human heart. Just like the Egyptians did not repent, the same place, neither do the Romans, neither do the oppressors of God's people here in John's time do that. So there will be more to come. Made it through 2 chapters.
Oh.
Does anybody have any questions or anything notable? Professor Chuck over here is about to.
But I find these 2 chapters hardest so far.
They are. And especially if we look at them as God's anger, it's not. Here's a word for you. When we talk about God's wrath, we always think it's vengeance. We think it's anger. We think it's shouldn't have been wrath. Should have been passion. That was the word. That's what the Greek word means. This is the passion of God. For this is how, okay, passion can take on anger sometimes, or take on the attributes of anger. But this passion is, I love these people so much, I want this to stop. and here's what I have to do to stop. Now, if you're looking from the viewpoint of God's throne, from God's own point of view, then imagine God's saying, it hurts right now. It'll get better. Think about, when I was little and I'd get some kind of a scrape or a cut or something like that, and my grandmother would pull out this hideous stuff called methylate or mercurochrome. Yeah. Oh man, and I was just like, no, I'm fine. It's okay. I didn't cut anything. Oh no, and you see her shaking the bottle, and here it comes. And I was just like, I would much rather just suffer than cut it off. It's okay but of course, and like every family, I'm sure, you had the team of cousins who were around who were going to blow on it once she put it on there. See, rings a bell, doesn't it?
All were willing to.
That's exactly right, because they know sooner or later they're going to have to get it. But from her point of view, she knows that I got to put this on there because I got to stop the infection from happening. Plus, you're going to get this little discoloration that's going to be on there for a few hours. But all of this is going to be for your good.
You know what mercurochrome has in it?
Devil's spit, I think.
Mercury.
I was gonna say,
Well, of course,
Poison.
mercurochrome.
Yeah.
I knew she was trying to kill me.
Bad example.
So, methylate then.
No, that makes me, so that explanation helps a little bit. When I'm going back to when you were talking about the silence and that the prayers going up, right, as incense out of the censer.
Right.
And then, because then the next, so after that, there's that silence and the prayers are being heard. And then verse 5 says, then the angel took the censer and filled it with fire from the altar and threw it on the earth. And there were peals of thunder, rumblings, and all that. Like, so it's the same thing that brought the prayers before. Is like God heard it and is now acting.
Yes.
Right. I mean, like, but that bit of like this isn't the wrath. This is. I mean, when you say that there's answer to prayer, the answer is this passion of God for salvation. I mean, for.
Yeah. And it's also like the coal is being thrown down. Okay, you've got the incense, then you put in the coal. That's what gets the incense all smoking and everything like that. And why don't we have censers in the Lutheran Church? I wish.
We have them. We just sometimes don't use them for. We listen. We listen more to some people that have allergies and don't.
Oh,
can't
sure.
do it.
I get
Yeah.
it. I get it.
I know some Catholic churches just use it no matter what.
Yes, and in fact, my roommate, he was a Jesuit, and Father Mitch Pacwa, if you know him, tell this story, that he was getting fancy with the censer.
Yep.
And so it's got the long chain on there, and so he actually decides. Now the bishop is behind him.
Yeah.
And so he actually whips this thing around, and it's going to like come all the way around, but it's kind of like a bayonet mount on the sit, and it unhinges, and hot ash goes over the congregation. Fortunately, the bishop was funny and understanding, and he could just hear the bishop saying, "Good thing I got the holy water." That's good stuff. Now, okay, all that to say that the coals with the incense go down in a sense of like facilitating the lifting of the prayers. So this comes down, and yes, it looks horrible for the people who are not marked with the seal, but this is also, it's like the angels are helping lift the prayers of those who are below. Because you've already had the angels in front of the throne who have been saying, what about, when is all this going to end? And remember, the Lord says, not done yet. There's still more to come. So this is kind of an action of throwing down the incense to raise the prayers, up into the throne also. But
I first did a censer when I was at St. Olaf, so they did some higher church liturgy stuff at college, but it also, when we heard about the prayers rising up. That was the caption I gave. Let my prayers rise before you as incense was the caption I gave to burning palm branches for Ash Wednesday. And I was also thinking, like, what are the smells? Like, what is what's the smells of our prayers rising before God? I just hadn't thought of that, multi-sensory experience before.
It in one place, where is it? Is it Malachi, or I think, who talks about the sweet smell of the incense of our prayers?
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, there's a good phrase like that.
Neat. Okay.
Another place it's called savory. So it's called sweet. It's called savory. No salty, no sour. So,
I'm good.
Yeah, and of course, so many hymns in church history talks about the sweetness of the prayers rising before the Lord and all like that. But it's fun stuff. So next week, chapter 10. 2 weeks. 2 weeks. Well, I'll be talking about it next week. I don't know where you're. I should always say next time. But next time.
Next time, chapter 10.
Chapter 10, maybe 11, but these are, with the 7 trumpets, I figured it was easier to jam all these into one. But still got the 7th trumpet to go. I figured it would be easier to put these 2 together than most of the others.
All right. I'll say goodbye.
Goodbye.